So yeah, these are turquoise cups. Turquoise cups are really popular, but like we want to look for lots of things such as like the bezel. So like this bezel, it doesn't really look handmade. So it doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's not vintage.
Guess who's back again? Oh, they don't know. Oh, they don't know. I bet they know as soon as we walk in. Shut up. I'm wearing Cuban links. Yeah. Designer mix. Yeah. Inglewood's finest shoes. Whoop, whoop. Don't look too hard, might hurt yourself. Known to give the color red the blues. Woo, shit. I'm a dangerous man with some money in my pocket. Keep up.
I'm super excited. I really try to look for a lot of items that were made by Navajo. Which is really tricky to do because there are a lot of items out there that are replicated and often say Navajo style, or sometimes it has a bunch of turquoise, but actually it's Chinese turquoise. It doesn't come from the Southwest mines and were in fact not made by the Navajo. So it's one of those things where you have to dig deep and know what you're looking for. So I came across this item and it got shipped to me, and I'm gonna unwrap it. And before I do, I wanna talk to you about what I might look for. So this particular Navajo necklace is called the Squash Blossom necklace. It's a Navajo necklace. It was first made by the Navajo. It was made as early as the 1870s. And there's a little bit of controversy about the history of this necklace, but basically the majority of people think that prior to the Spanish Mexicans coming to the Native American lands, the jewelry was not made from silver. However, once they started coming, Native Americans came across silver in forms of coinage, silver dollars, but also slugs. And they began to melt down these coinage and slugs to make silver. And in fact, they actually went ahead and did this quite often, and then later really started using turquoise with the silver to make these necklaces. Now, turquoise has always been something that's been incorporated into the Navajo jewelry often because they considered turquoise coming from Mother Earth. It has that sky blue water color, which also reminds them of Earth. And at the same exact time, it's also known to be very protective. So eventually they started making these necklaces with silver and turquoise. The later that the years went by, the more turquoise started to be on it. So if we see a necklace that has no turquoise or a little bit of turquoise, sometimes that's indicative of it being a little bit older. Which doesn't necessarily mean that the newer stuff is not cool and beautiful, but it's just something to look for. Something else we're going to look for on here is to see if it is in fact ingot, meaning that it's hand poured silver, melted down from that coinage or the slugs. That means the beads won't be completely uniform because of course they were handmade. We're going to look for wear, of course. We're going to see if there's any markings that say Navajo on the back. Now, really early pieces often weren't stamped Navajo, but a little later they started stamping it. So just because it's not stamped Navajo does not mean that it's not made by the Navajo. Some of the other things that we're going to look for is the type of clasp that's on it to see if it's more modern or if it's, something that's a little more vintage. And then also we're just going to take a look at the turquoise to see if there is a lot of turquoise, a little bit of turquoise, and we'll even pay attention to the bezel, okay? And so here is this necklace. Now, the Squash Blossom necklace is known for its 3 parts. Okay, so let's take a look at what I got. Remember, we're hoping for all of those great things. Hoping that this is not some knockoff, not some just new replica. Really hoping to see that it looks vintage and authentic. I see it. I'm not seeing a lot of turquoise, so that's making me really happy for this particular reason, for this particular necklace. Let's see here. Oh, this is really exciting. There's the piece. In a minute, I'll switch it back to me so I can talk to you about some of the things I notice about this necklace right away. I'm super excited. Okay, and I'm gonna show you here. So the 3 different parts that we're gonna be looking at are these round beads. And then these beads, super cool. There's actually a Navajo word for this. That means bead that spreads out. But you can see that it actually looks like a flower petal blossoming. Now, there's a little controversy. Some think that this was kind of a style borrowed from the Spanish that are to look like pomegranate, but a lot of people believe that it's to look like the squash blossom, because squash was something, of course, that was very important, the crop that's super important to them. So we have the rounded bead, the squash bead, it looks like a blossom, and then the naja. This is called a naja, and so it is sort of this crescent shaped. And this really oftentimes is something that is for protection, but also if you see something in the middle of the crescent, it often kind of depicts a womb, also somewhat symbolizing, you know, protection. And so this was often worn, not necessarily in religious ceremonies, but it was worn often, one for protection, but two to kind of show wealth. Okay, so here it is. Now I can't wait to take a look at this. I am going to grab my magnifying glass so we can look to see if there's any markings. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to take a look, and I'm going to look to see if I can spot any kind of marking. Now I might have to do it with a more powerful microscope. And remember, just because there isn't a mark does not mean that it's not vintage. Okay, often the very oldest ones did not have any marks on it. I'm not seeing a mark, but I am seeing some really cool things about this. Okay, I'll study it a little bit more when I have a stronger magnifying glass. But one thing I told you I wanted to look at was the clasp. And I am super happy to see that this is a very traditional hook clasp. See that? So this is something that often was used. It just hooks on just like that. Very simple clasp. If it's too modern, sometimes I'm a little worried about that, like a barrel clasp or something, because of course they didn't use that back then. The next thing that we're going to look at is these round beads. And one of the things that we're checking to see is if they're uniform, okay? And one of the great things about this is you can see, I'm hoping that you can see that they're not quite uniform. And I actually see some dents in there, which in this particular case, that's really good because that shows me, oh, here's a good example. So that shows me that it's not machine made. Can you see those grooves on there? So that's an excellent indicator that this is authentic. Okay, here's a close-up of the squash blossom. Very amazing because these are hand-made beads that have been soldered on. And remember, this was a long time ago, so the tools they used were very ancient. It's really amazing that they could even do this. And then lastly, we're going to take a look at the nausea, okay? So oftentimes there's this double crescent, but what I really like in between is that there is this wiring, as you can see, which I can tell is handmade, because if we flip it over to the back, you can see there are some grooves in there. You can see that, and it's not quite exactly even like you might find if this was machine made. Okay, and then I'm gonna flip it over and we're gonna take a look at the turquoise. Now, as you can tell, there's not a ton of turquoise on here, and if you remember, I told you that earlier necklaces like this, they really used no turquoise or very little turquoise. So some that you'll see are beautiful, but all the way down, you're gonna see turquoise. This one only has 3 little stones, 2 of these end pieces, and then this one in the middle. Now, the cool thing about this is if you take a really close look at the bezel is the part that holds. It holds the stone. So let me show you here. This is the bezel right here. And the nice thing about this bezel is it actually, once again, it does not look super uniform. Yeah, and you can tell that it's been handmade and formed into that bezel. Okay, now that we talked about all of the very cool things about this squash blossom necklace, I want to compare it to another necklace that we got to show you the differences. Okay, so here's the one that I just unveiled. Okay, that I'm super excited about for all the reasons I mentioned. Now let me show you a different necklace that was advertised as an authentic Navajo squash blossom necklace. So the first thing that I noticed when I looked at this is that the clasp on it is pretty modern. It's the spring clasp like we see on most necklaces today, as compared to this hook clasp on this vintage necklace. The second thing that I want to do right away is to show you that this particular necklace is sterling. Okay, it's not going to have any magnetic pull because it's in fact sterling silver, which is indicative of Navajo jewelry. Even the blossoms, there's the nausea. You can just see it's not. But let's take a look at this supposed squash blossom necklace. Now remember, if it's sterling silver, it should not have this magnetic pull. So I can feel it really pull. The turquoise happens to be heavy, or the supposed turquoise. But let me show you on something lighter. Do you see that?
So it's definitely not sterling silver. It has that very modern clasp. It does have a lot of turquoise on it, which is not indicative of an older Navajo squash blossom necklace. And then if you take a look at the authentic squash blossom that was handmade. You can kind of really tell that this is a handmade piece. You see that? But take a look at these. One, it's not even separate pieces. And then you can tell these are identical and were not handmade. There also, as if you remember, I told you that there would be these silver beads that are also handmade, and there is no beads. So we want to be looking for circle beads, these beads that spread out, which look like that blossom, and the naja. So it doesn't even have those circle beads on there. Definitely not, I wouldn't even call this a bead at all. This is not a blossom bead. This is definitely just all one piece. And then if we take a look at the back, you can see right here, this looks very enhanced. It's highly saturated. It's very glossy. There really are no signs of wear or marks. And then you can see here that these pieces are all separate that have been soldered on. And even, for example, this wire, this rope wire in between, you can tell that's very handmade. Once again, this kind of just looks like one big piece. So don't be fooled. This was advertised, this one right here, was advertised as a squash blossom necklace. Even said it was Native American. I do not think so. I'm not saying it's not a pretty necklace, but I do not think the turquoise is real. The silver for sure is not real. It doesn't have all the parts of a squash blossom, and it's certainly not handmade. So let's compare the two, and you can see a huge difference. Fake, real. I'll even zoom it out a little bit. Fake, real. And I'm super happy with our real piece. And actually, we will be listing this one very, very soon. You will not be seeing this on any of our sites. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this, and I will be talking to you soon on our next video. Bye.